The Dark History of the Reincarnated Villainess, Volume 2 Review. Back in March, I reviewed the first volume on the Dark History of the Reincarnated Villainess, although I ended up having mixed feelings in the first installment. I was hopeful things will improve in the second book, and now it's time to find out what happened. As I reunite with protagonist Iana and find her enjoy a relatively peaceful existence alongside his sister, Konoha, and servant Sol. However, all the changes there were a boy called Yomi returns from the Lily Kingdom, having originally created this world. Iana should be familiar with all the characters by when Yomi arrives. She has no recollection of him at all. It's only after he informs her that he's here to help her kill Konoha and that Iana finally remembers his purpose in the story. Yomi was written to be a villain who will side with Iana on her quest to murder Konoha and who was deeply in love with her. Of course, Iana is trying to avoid following the path of the story. She wrote and now tries desperately to prove to Yomi that she no longer wishes to harm Konoha. Naturally, her behavior causes Sol to become suspicious of her relationship with Yomi, which in itself makes Iana worry that she's already tripped to that flag. The last thing she needs is for Sol to decide she's after Konoha's life and kill her in advance. In the review of Volume 1, I commented that the series struggled with its contrast between a dark narrative and the shoujo moments. On the whole, I think this installment avoids those issues, largely because it leans more heavily into comedy and romantic antics with the inclusion of Yomi. There was still a dark undercurrent to the story because Iana is worried about being killed, but I think the story is more coherent now than it was before. The bigger issue this time around is that Yomi is a frustrating character in so many ways, despite how hard Iana tries to tell him she's changed her plans and turned over a new leaf. He refuses to believe her. For someone very intelligent otherwise, it doesn't make sense that he won't listen to her and remain so stubborn. That said, when it comes to Iana, Yomi isn't the only one who won't listen, while Sol doesn't neglect his duties toward making sure Konoha is safe. It's clear that one of the reasons that he becomes so suspicious of Yomi so quickly is because he's jealous of how close Iana is to him. It was very obvious in Volume 1 that Sol now harbors romantic feelings for Iana, and it's interesting to see their surface here. If Yuni sticks around long term, these two are the sort of characters who will butt heads non-stops. If you find yourself particularly invested in the romance aspects of the dark history of the Reincarnated Villainess, then you will certainly enjoy seeing where the story goes from here as it leans into it. If you enjoyed the first volume because of the dark narrative, well, I think this one will disappoint, and I'm not convinced to go back to it in the future. The problem for me is that nothing about the shoujo aspects of the series were all that original, nor they're particularly compelling. I quite like the bonding relationship between Iana and Sol, but considering how airheaded Iana is, I'm not convincing it's going anywhere anytime soon either. Your enjoyment is going to hinge on how much you care about these characters. The Dark History of the Reincarnated Villainess Volume 2 comes to the West thanks to Yen Press and continues to be translated by Lisa Kaufman. Lettering, on the other hand, was changed over the decade, and since our uses of the fairy tale style font things are more eligible than they were before, Yen has Volume 3 of the series scheduled for release in July. Overall, the Dark History of the Reincarnated Villainess Volume 2 was worked out what direction to take the story in. It's not perfect, but it's certainly an improvement of the first book. How much you enjoy will depend on how much patience you had with the new character. 7 out of 10.